There are a ton of indie horror games out there in the market, most of which you have to search for to find. There are a few indie horror games that stick out though. One such game is Five Nights at Freddy's, a game where you have to protect yourself from animatronics in a Chuck E. Cheese style restaurant using electronic doors in the night shift. Becoming hugely noticed and widespread very quickly after release, the developer Scott Cawthon quickly went to work in making many more games to make it a series with a cult following to this day. Even though the game became quite the success in more ways than one, the reception from gamers seemed to be a mixed bag, at least from what I've personally seen in comments sections and reviews. Most of the criticisms I hear is about how the games look to be just a jump scare fest and not much else. And if you were to watch popular YouTubers play the games, especially ones with more cuts and editing involved, it can certainly look that way. I do, however, think there's genuinely good reasoning behind why this series didn't die after the first couple installments, and why there's still a cult following to this day. So please, join me as I explore why Five Nights at Freddy's still has quite the fanbase behind it. One aspect that I think makes horror games so appealing is how frequently they have a deeply involved and often complicated story. I'm sure this doesn't necessarily apply to all horror fans, of course, but story is important for a lot of people like myself, who are interested in the stories that horror productions provide. As empty as the story may appear if you just look at most of what you play, there is a lot of lore to explore throughout the franchise. So much so that popular YouTubers have dedicated literally tens of videos in an attempt to cover it all. While you certainly do have to go out of your way to understand it all, I think that's part of what makes it so addictive. It's not just a story handed to you on a silver platter. It's lore that you have to actively engage with, and it can be somewhat of a journey in its own right to discover it all. Even if you try to take the easy way and just watch a bunch of videos attempting to explain it all, it's still something you need to pay attention to if you want to really follow it. With that said, some fans are certainly entertained just by the stories of the franchise and nothing else, so that's one part of the games that managed to stick around. A lot of people, including myself for a while, thought of the games as being largely just there for quick and cheap jump scares when it comes to the game overs. Even as a horror fan, when I was watching the games for the first time, I only thought of it as having very little ambiance and atmosphere since you can't go anywhere, have very basic things you can do, and artistically speaking, the first game doesn't appear to stand out in any particular way, really. As I found out by playing the games, however, there actually is quite a bit of ambience and atmosphere to speak of. It's not really created by one particular thing or another, but when you add up all the sights and sounds as well as the tension that's created by its gameplay, and having to last a full night without making a major mistake, which is over 8 minutes in the first game by the way, it can definitely create a genuine sense of unease. Because of these factors in play, I don't think of the game as just being quick and easy jump scares. I think it actually earns them, and that's just the first game. I personally think the games have only gotten better over time in this regard, especially with the more artistic changes. Some of the atmosphere is also enhanced by the gameplay itself in my opinion. With plenty of things to do in most of the games and multiple ways you can fail, you have to be careful and really learn the game mechanics by figuring them out instead of just being told every little thing. While it certainly includes a lot of trial and error, like many of the difficult and satisfying games, it's largely your fault if you die and your triumph if you succeed surviving in the night. I think one thing that's really freshened the game experience for most players is that once you've beaten as much as you want of one game, the next one always provides a different experience than the rest. Some games are more similar to each other than others, but all provide a considerable amount of fundamental changes to the gameplay. While drastic changes certainly provides risk of critically negative reception, I think each game's gameplay is done well enough so that it keeps players coming back for more. The more I learn the gameplay mechanics, the more I actually want to play the game even though each game can be quite punishing. It's satisfying seeing you progress and learn how mechanics work, and I think it's contributed to the game's success. They've even recently released a Five Nights game called Ultimate Custom Night that strays from the underlying Five Nights and heavy lore elements in favor of more gameplay with more refinement. Five Nights at Freddy's has certainly had an interesting 4 years thus far, and it's also caused a lot of divide even among its own fan base. However, with developers like Scott Cawthon who can take critically negative feedback from one game and turn it into a success with another, I think there's little doubt that heavy experimentation and consistently furthering yourself as a game developer will only improve the gaming industry as time goes on. With all of my thoughts out of the way though, always remember to have fun.